I had been betrayed. Like there was a lot of personal emotion to work through. And then what did it mean about me professionally? Did it mean I was less? So I think going on these personal
Yeah.
journeys of value of what am I here to bring? How can I contribute where I am? What can I learn here? How can I grow? These dark times when they talk about hitting rock bottom open up this growth opportunity. So if we remove this black and white, I'm only good with these things, or with this pursuit of having a certain dollar amount or possession, it can remove us from the opportunity of learning from failures, from setbacks, from uncomfortability. So I think what I learned from a lot of those who utilize the opportunity to be on Skid Row was tremendous resilience.
Welcome to the Derelict Podcast. For the disparaged, depleted, and delinquent souls trying to find our way, we're talking about the scary part of the journey, where we don't know how it'll end. Let's be free to face our fucking failures in real time as the most unadulterated, truest version of who we are. No sugarcoating. Welcome to the shit show, you derelict.
Welcome back to the Derelict Podcast. I am your host, Josh Abandonato. We have a different bit of a view here. We'll talk about that here in a second. But more importantly, we're going to talk about our guest. And we're thanking Richard Ohlberger for being here, a.k.a. you go by Dr. Zero?
That's right,
Is that correct?
Dr. O.
What is, okay, so let's just start with that. What is Dr. O, Dr. Zero? What does that mean?
Well, on Skid Row, I got nice big smack in the face midway through my work for LA County, where I was getting my ego nice and big and had my name on my shirt and was bossing around policemen and school principals and ER doctors. And just when the ego was getting big enough, I got transferred down to work on Skid Row here in Los Angeles, which for your listeners, if they are not familiar, is one of the highest capita homelessness in the nation. Also, the most shelters in a small area, and missions. So it's interesting, but it is quite dirty. It is physically uncomfortable, and it's quite an intersection between gentrification and drug abuse. And so at the time, even the clinic, mental health clinic on Skid Row, was in a trailer. And so we worked in like a double wide trailer. You have to come out of these environment to a window, like a ticket window in the front. And patients would check in and they would announce your name over a microphone. So the only way to give out appointments, because it's such a chaotic Grand Central type environment, was this kind of like mini post-it note that had, your appointment is at 2:30 p.m. on 8/28/24, and you would have to like try and scribble your name on. So a lot of the people couldn't read. They couldn't read, the Dr. O. So I'd hear over the microphone, Dr. Zero, your 2 p.m. is here. So it kind of, one of my fellow
Got it.
one of my fellow social workers downtown was a graphic artist, and made it like a kind of comic-y superhero icon. So it helped me get through my time on Skid Row. Yeah.
I love it. And how appropriate to be talking about Skid Row, which is, I've been there before. It is not a very clean place. There's a lot of tents. There's a lot of homeless encampments. And like you said, like the nice part about Skid Row is a double wide trailer, right? And how appropriate to talk about that with this amazing background behind me. Like, what a great way to start a podcast. What a great
gorgeous.
way to talk about. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I decided to take myself on a little mini vacation, and it shows you how missional I am about this podcast. We're still recording a podcast. I didn't reschedule or anything else. So I'm just trying to enjoy my time here. But more importantly, let's get back to you. So Dr. O, Dr. Zero, something on a Superman, chest outfit. I definitely could see it now. So you're a psychologist based in Los Angeles, right?
That's
right.
And,
based on our conversation that we had before we got introduced, and it seems like you offer a pretty unique perspective just into psychology, working with men in the modern world. And obviously you've had a lot of experience with homeless people on Skid Row, people with trauma, people with, you talked a little bit about performance anxiety, I think was what you mentioned before And it sounds like you just have a lot of insights into that. And one of the reasons I think I was so intrigued to have you on the podcast is because the whole genesis of this podcast is trying to figure out how to help men be more vulnerable in a good way, to be more open about their failures, their struggles, what we're going through. And, it's obviously a lot easier to see somebody on Skid Row and be like, well, yeah, that guy's struggling, but not me. Like, I'm wearing a flowered shirt in a nice hotel room with the city in the background. Clearly, I don't have any struggles, right? Which is like why I just think that this background is so appropriate for today, because, most of the listeners probably listen to this podcast, at least from my experience, are not the people on Skid Row. They're the people that might be in their midlife. They are somewhat successful in their careers, their jobs. Maybe they have families, etc. And maybe they don't. I don't know, but that's the majority of them. And, I think that there's a certain societal maybe expectation that, like, I don't know, we're not struggling. We're not failing. I got a nice shirt on. I'm at a nice hotel. I have a nice background. You have a bunch of books behind you. You look like you're successful, right? So I don't know. Let's just start with that. I wonder, just maybe kind of briefly tell us your background and why you got so passionate about working with men, or even how you ended up finding yourself on Skid Row in the first place. I know you started that story, but where did
Yeah.
that come from?
I mean, there's a few different angles. And first of all, let me tell you, like Jon Kabat-Zinn often says, an author of a book called Wherever You Go, There You Are, right? That we bring ourselves where we are. I just came from a hotel in Indianapolis in downtown, and I had to face some of my internal fears, seemingly on vacation. So it's 6 in the morning on vacation. So we never know when where we're going to show up, and where aspects of what I call our masks are going to get revealed to us. So, personally, growing up in New York, I was always in conflict around mental health. Like, is this training, is this schooling going to lead me only to help Manhattan, New York elite? If I get a PhD in psychology, is this Freudian ideal of I'm going to help people with the money, the haves and the have-nots? And I think I wrote my graduate school entrance exam on that. Like, there was a conflict around that. On, does being a man who helps others and be successful, do I then cut myself off from other men? And how do I live with this dichotomy? And so there was always this conflict there. And I helped. Skid Row is just where I got started. But at night, I'd go from Skid Row and then I'd drive 8 miles to Beverly Hills, and I would help doctors and former NBA and MMA
Yeah,
fighters. So
right.
the journey, and you would think on the outside that one is more glamorous, or that the issues would be a lot different. And clearly, when somebody's on a level of survival or just getting food and shelter, we can't compare what they're going through. But there were things that I learned in the environment. There were aspects of resilience, aspects of community that I saw on Skid Row that helped people get sober, get healthy, begin to address their long-term mental health. So I think the curiosity, I think as a man, as a clinician, as a coach, this kind of internal curiosity, what is it that helps people find themselves and find them on a pathway to living their best version of themselves, whatever it looks like? Because this fantasy that being an athlete or having a lot of money or living in Beverly Hills solves the internal pains or struggles is an illusion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'd be curious. I mean, so let me just give you an example. And then
Yeah.
I want to come back to something that you said that I think was really powerful. So, I actually decided when I took myself on this little vacation that, I normally don't post things like this to social media, because I've always felt growing up that it was like bragging if I showed that I was like trying to nurture myself and take care of myself. And the reason I did it is because I was kind of going through a hard time and I just wanted to get away for a day, etc. Right. And then I realized, like, no, that's actually probably pretty healthy to post on social media, not in a bragging way, but more of a like, this is how I'm nurturing myself sort of way. And men don't know how to do that usually. At least I don't, for sure. So I was trying to encourage other guys, like, whether it's a hotel or something else, like, do something to nurture yourself when you need to. But the only reason I bring that up is that there was a guy that commented on the post that I knew back in high school that basically said something. Yeah, here we go. That basically said something to the effect of like, well, there's very few people that I knew that were as rich as you in high school. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I was like, help me understand. You tell me how rich I was, right? And we kind of got into this little conversation, and I was like, that's an interesting perspective. Now let me tell you a little bit about my perspective. My parents didn't hand me a bunch of stuff. They didn't buy me a house. They didn't start me a business. That like all of this stuff I figured out myself. And also, my dad is still working part-time at 84 years old. So you tell me how rich we are when he's still working part-time at 84, right? And then just that conversation changed his perception already automatically. I was like, yes, exactly. What you see on social media, what you see from this persona, this could just be me getting into $500 worth of debt to try to look cool on a podcast, right?
Right.
So I guess the only reason I'm bringing in that whole story is, first of all, money doesn't buy happiness. I've been poor. I've had more money, and neither one has been better if my internals haven't changed. But I guess this is a long-winded way of actually asking you a question, because I really want you to talk about this. And I'm curious, you're absolutely right. Obviously, somebody that can't afford food is in a very different spot than somebody who lives in Beverly Hills, right? If their basic needs aren't getting met, that's a whole different story. But mentally, psychologically, in their spirit, what are some things that you notice that are similar in working with two very demographics?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that drew me, and I'll get into my own men's work, and drew me to, first of all, was the admission or the acknowledgement and being humbled myself that,
Yeah.
because I've had this internal feeling, even though I didn't want to serve the haves only, in, let's say, in my childhood vision, that there's something deflating about having to go work with the poor or with those who did in my own value system, my own, maybe even if I thought intellectually, my emotional interpretation of it, like you were saying, how we perceive was that I had been devalued, I had been betrayed. Like there was a lot of personal emotion to work through. And then what did it mean about me professionally? Did it mean I was less? So I think going on these personal
Yeah.
journeys of value of what am I here to bring? How can I contribute where I am? What can I learn here? How can I grow? These dark times when they talk about hitting rock bottom open up this growth opportunity. So if we remove this black and white, I'm only good with these things or with this pursuit of having a certain dollar amount or possession, it can remove us from the opportunity of learning from failures, from setbacks, from uncomfortability. So I think what I learned from a lot of those who utilized the opportunity to be on Skid Row was tremendous resilience. They had to ask for support from various sources. So whether it be receiving food, receiving counseling, receiving medicines, receiving the support of, let's say, a substance abuse recovery group. So they embrace the support, they embrace the community aspect, and the humility, the gratitude also. You would think that these individuals were, blessed or happy just to be able to attend their treatment. They understood what they were being given. They appreciated. So that sense of valuing what you're given, growing, learning, creating community. You would have thought having a potluck on Skid Row that, that these individuals were abundant. They all brought, whether it be the crackers or the coffee, they found ways to give and create relationships and create meaning from their recovery. In a lot of ways, I saw them maintaining sobriety for long periods of time and getting on pathways towards a better life. So when I think that encountering those basic values starts to show you that sometimes when things get more comfortable, we can get focused on comparing socially, comparing monetarily, focusing a lot on future, what we don't have, what we're afraid of losing a lot of times, right? How do we maintain a certain level or yeah, I think a lot of fear gets in the way, and
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
external validation can replace, this sometimes imposter syndrome of feeling like, am I enough? Can I ask for help? Who do I go to? I have men making $500,000 a year that are my clients that don't have any meta They don't have
Right.
they don't
Right.
have friends or community. So I think the acknowledgement that sometimes the prioritization along the way in becoming successful and whatever that looks like in your personalized version, whether you be someone who's, working in the, you know, the medicinal world of CBD, or whether you be an ER physician, or whether you be an elite athlete, that sometimes the prioritization of what it took to become successful cuts us off from asking these questions of what do I really need to be fulfilled,
Mm.
and how do I get this accountability to be the best version of myself in all ways.
Yeah. So I want to make sure I hear too, going back to the original question. So what do you, and maybe I missed it, what do you feel like the similarities were though? I'm
Uh,
curious because I'm
Thank you,
hearing some
Josh.
yeah,
I
yeah,
need
no, it's all
I
good.
need the redirection.
I'm hearing differences which are really good, and there's a couple really key points that you also brought up that I would
Yeah.
love to touch on more. Like, so here's the couple ways I want to go, and you decide which way you want to go. Here's my couple questions. Number one is that 500,000 a year guy that doesn't have men in his life, doesn't have community. My curious nature would ask why. Like, are there common themes among that? And then my other question would be, what similarities are you seeing that men are going through that were on Skid Row and also in Beverly Hills? Take whichever one you want.
I'll probably have you re-ask the second part, but the first part is the similarities. I think, first of all, from a trauma perspective, many of us have been through either it's intergenerational or cross-cultural trauma, some version
Right,
along the way
right,
of what maybe your father or his father went through to become successful, right? Even that work ethic or where that comes from, there's a strength. And then there could be messages of, this is your valuation. This is how you prove your worth. Or at some point, that's
right,
the only way to survive. You work. As a man, those core, you're the provider. This is who you are. This is what you do. Don't express. Or there was a simple opportunity that you could not express. It's people who had to leave countries
right,
or move against their will,
right,
or at an age when they didn't even have a chance to really choose. Some of the freedoms and things that we take for granted here in the United States of having choice, of having agency. So that similarity of addiction, whether it be and mental health, right, family trauma, um, emotional stability, security at a young age, or even having those basic needs. If those things are cut off, whether or not you now don't have a home or a stable environment, or you've moved across the country thinking somehow environment or geography would change that, or in the case of the haves and the wealthy individuals, the fact that maybe money or success covered up for not coming
yeah,
from a lot,
right,
or in maintaining what you did come from, right? That if I'm not an elite athlete, or if I'm not, now I'm in a community where I maintain a house and a vacation, now I've retired. And also, like, people have expectations of you, even if you're the nicest person who wants to live up to expectations. What happens if you didn't become an all-star, or you didn't make as much as you thought, and your family is depending on you or saw you in a certain way? Like you were talking about, you're getting hit with somebody,
is that still your worth, right? Like, do you
right?
still have worth if you don't reach a certain level of financial success or relationship success or anything else?
And is it
Yeah,
okay? Right. Is it okay to, to create your worth in a insurance business or in some other form of entrepreneurship? And what happens when you go out and you fail as an entrepreneur in your first venture? Like you're saying, like, so, people, talk about social media presence. I mean, the access and the comments and the ability to invade our personal space is a lot, right, with social media, especially when you're a public figure.
Well, and to back to my point about my friend from high school. Like I graduated high school 22 years ago, bro. 22 years ago, and his first thought when I posted that I was trying to do something nice with myself. And by the way, personally, I never post on social media. I do for podcasts and everything else, but I was off social media for 11 years after my son was born. So this is a very new thing for me.
Right.
Excuse me. And his first thought after 22 years of me posting that I'm doing something nice to myself was, well, you were just rich as a kid and you just had everything handed to you on a silver platter. That was his first thought 22 years later. Isn't that amazing? It just never leaves, right? We have these ideas of what's going on. So can we go back to, I would like you to help the audience with a word that I often struggle with. The word trauma is thrown around a lot these days. I feel like every time I turn my head, I hear somebody talking about their trauma. So I'm not trying to say that trauma doesn't exist. Trauma clearly does exist, right? But I want you, as a psychologist and somebody who's more of an expert on this, will you help us understand what's actually a trauma and what's not a trauma so that we understand when people use that word? Because I don't know about your experience, but I've just seen that people use it inaccurately all the time. Like, oh, she painted my fingernail pink instead of blue. I'm traumatized. Like, seriously? Like what? So how would you define trauma? What does that actually mean?
Yeah, and I want to get back to answering more of your question on the similarities that we discover in humanity. But the thing is that for someone with traumatic past, it may be traumatic when they make your Starbucks drink wrong. It may feel that way. Okay, so there are attachment traumas, there are developmental traumas, there are things that we may not even be aware of. I have twins. I think at some level something happens to one, even on an unconscious level, the other one feels it. So, on the other hand, I certainly don't want to teach. We want to become aware of that as much as possible in our field. We want to it can become our superpower, to become aware of the field of sensitivity and emotional vulnerability that we come from. So when we talk about my grandfather or your grandfather or people that we haven't even met or ancestors or parts of our culture or things like that have happened in our country in the last few years. So to get back to your specific definition as a psychologist, my understanding as a somatic psychologist is trauma is anything that happens too fast, quick, um, without ability for your nervous system to respond, that threatens our sense of, like we started talking about, safety, our ability to self-protect, our ability to feel love, or challenges these very core things. So shame, so things of that nature where we didn't feel we had a chance to protect, feel love, get care, um, or be seen in a very, very basic way as a human being. So,
Do you think that people ever use the word trauma just as a way of not actually dealing with their trauma? Does that question make sense? Like if I label it as trauma, then maybe I can just set it aside and be like, oh, it's trauma. And does that make sense?
well, I want to, as a psychologist and a coach and a man who runs men's groups and retreats, I want to always see the best version of human beings. And I
Right.
want to look at the things, even Gabor Mate talks a lot about, even addiction. So somebody, even addiction, he says, is a merciful way of addressing your trauma. So you think about that on one level, that somebody's going into denial or avoidance, complete avoidance, which it seems like very skillful. If I say, oh, that's my trauma, and therefore, like, oh, that person triggers me, or I don't go there, I don't go to those places, I don't go out in public, I don't do this, I don't do that. Well, on one level, it is a very skillful way to keep yourself protected and safe. On the other hand,
Yeah,
there's a
that makes
level
sense.
of avoidance where avoidance leads to further susceptibility to trauma. So when you say, right, whether it become, man, women, oh, all men are bad, all women are bad. I broke my heart twice, right? When you go into that place, you then close yourself off from healing in a way, or the potential for
Yeah,
healing, because we don't know if that next date we go on is going to be healing, or we might pick up on some of the same things that we experienced, which were painful. We don't know. There's an unknown in our experience. And I think that what a lot of us are saying is without trust in ourselves, without further safety, protection, ways of processing, that our internal nervous system may react probably in the same way it always has. So if we learn that, men are not to be trusted, right? Even for other men, men are not to be trusted, men are a threat. Then the minute I perceive you, I was in the ER yesterday with my son. The nurse came in with a sleeve of tattoos and he looked like a football player. And I was tired. Those are the facts. My internal system, some sort of, he's standing, I'm sitting, I'm vulnerable and scared. He's a threat. So it's interesting how I took time, even on my limited levels of awareness, to work through this. That this man is a friend. This man is here to help. He's here to care for my family member. But internally, that defensive aspect comes up. So we have to kind of, the work of becoming self-aware, the work of self-healing is to like acknowledge this, to see that's completely natural. That's how we've been conditioned, is that if I was out in a dark alley and I saw those signs, somehow perceptually to me, this guy could hurt me. And so I'd have to be wary. And yet it takes emotional work to say, no, hey, this guy's here to heal. He's to help. He's actually, his strength and his size and his makes him more compassionate and caring. And to be able to bring that into the state of, awareness. And then if you're confident enough to bring it into the state of relationship to say, ah, you're a gift. I see you, right? I see what's good about you, to trust yourself enough to bring it into a relationship, of how much we need other people. And I think as men, we're ashamed or embarrassed, or we just don't know how to bring that level to other
right,
men. And we don't really
right.
trust that we can build relationships, and that we can take care of ourselves for a risk. If I compliment you, if I thank you and you can't handle it, like it's okay. Like it's okay that if you're not ready. And that's why having groups, having societies, communities, building, being involved in coming together to try and heal is my mission. It's part of what I'm here to do the work, and why I think there's so much value in it. Because the man who doesn't have and the man who does have are the same man. They're the same, and being
Right.
willing to see one another, acknowledge one another, and work through these pains. Let's say trauma has this identity that it's permanent or can't be come back from. And I think that's just because we don't believe there's a way to heal, or that we could find enough, that there's not enough safety in the world, or we just don't believe that there's a method or a place or anything could take away. Like we think we'll invalidate that if I say I'm healing now, or I'm doing much better and I feel abundant in my life right now to give myself this hotel stay, that somehow takes away and means I wasn't in pain as a kid, or that my father never struggled. It could all be. It's all part of the same story, right? Like, in fact, when we're abundant now, whether it be me sitting in a bagel cafe in Indiana or you sitting wherever you are today, you know, it's this act of self-love which says, I appreciate everything about me and everything it took for me to get here. And that's why it's so important, because it validates everything along the timeline. It heals. The
Yeah,
minute we go,
absolutely.
this is exactly why we work, why we strive, is to get to this place of being in appreciation for everything that we are. And everything that you are is the accumulation of every place that you've come from and all the people that helped you get here and all the experiences. So, yeah,
For
to
sure.
say that somebody having or not having is good or bad, right? We know plenty of people that come from nothing and become super successful because they use it in an empowering way, and plenty of people that come from a lot that then use it as a reason not to be motivated and not to pursue more. So, um,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, thank you for that. That was really good stuff. And I'm gonna put a shameless plug in here about a half an hour into the episode for you and for myself, where men that are listening and watching this right now, we need community, you guys. We need other men to be with. And Dr. O is an expert on this. He does this. He brings men together. I do as well. I also have a Facebook group that I just started for derelict people that are it's just men. It's just private. We just have a space to be vulnerable and open and talk about the stuff that we're going through. You do retreats, or the different groups that you have, I should say, not retreats, but the different groups that you have as well. So please check the resources right now. Whether you're watching this or listening to this, check the resources on here, and there will be resources for communities that you can be involved with, because that's so incredibly important and powerful. And without that, we isolate. And when we isolate, it's not good for humanity. It doesn't pursue our mission. It doesn't allow us to really be alive as men. So there's my shameless plug. I want to come back to something that you said earlier, though. Two things that you said that I thought were really, really key were awareness and confidence, or, maybe curiosity and awareness and confidence, right? Where you have to be at a place like your example with that. Was it a nurse, the football player?
yeah,
Yeah. So with the nurse, I think is a great example, because you first have to be aware of, like, I'm feeling a certain way. I'm responding a certain way. Why is that? Without judging it, right? This is not like my feelings are good or bad. At least that's not what I heard you say. What I heard you say is just, what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this? What's going on? I've heard it termed before to be a curious observer, and that's always been really helpful for me. That I try to be a curious observer to my feelings, and not, because when my feelings take over my body, I can't be rational. I can't think. Logic goes out the window, and it just does whatever it does. But if I can be a curious observer to, like, what I'm feeling and why I'm feeling that way, then maybe I can start thinking about whether it's a trauma or something else that has me responding in a certain way, right? Maybe a big football looking dude with a bunch of tattoos beat you up when you were a kid, right? So you now see him taking care of your kid, and you're like, no, he's not supposed to take care of my kid. He beat me up as a kid. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that was your experience, but if you can be a curious observer with that, and you can remove yourself from that, then it's like, then that awareness comes of, oh, interesting. This guy is an amazing guy who's here helping my son. This has nothing to do with my story. It has nothing to do with why I'm responding this way. At least that's been my experience. So I love that. But I think that goes hand in hand with the second thing that you said, which is confidence. I also have to be confident with myself as a person, that I can remove myself from that and realize, like, oh no, I am a whole, complete person, and I understand that this is happening, and why is it happening? Where is this going? Yeah. So I don't know if you have
yeah.
any thoughts on that, but
Well, I mean, I don't want to make, men feel confidence, because a lot of us don't have confidence. We've got a lot of insecurity and we're afraid of it and we hide from it. So I think the first step is vulnerability, to realize you are an emotional being. There's shameless plugs included in the zero method. I talk a little bit about things that are, checking in with the body scans, because a lot of times our emotions are stored in our body. So I may just notice things like my jaw tightens, my shoulders tense, I puff up. Like, I just may notice things about my body. So we can start there in just our body language.
and just, can I just ask you a quick clarifying question? Have you noticed that with yourself and the men that you work with, that are there specific things that are maybe kind of unique to each man that happen? Like you mentioned, your jaw clenching and your body tightening up, and
Yes, it's very unique the way you hold it. And again, like, sometimes I get images of myself now and I'm like, oh, like my dad was often, quiet, or his jaw was tight, like, So probably behaviorally, I picked it up or observed a certain way. Now it becomes clear to me he had 4 older sisters. He was a great listener. I often, in my book, I talk about I think I became a therapist more from him, and he never had a college degree
Right.
because I
I mean, he
saw
had to. He had 4 sisters.
certain
Absolutely.
mannerisms. He was a great listener. That's right. So, right. Like, so was it my PhD or was it just that I watched my dad as a young kid or some combo in between? But, right, the ability to see, right. So maybe he learned that, right? If I want to fit in this family of 5, I better just listen. And maybe he didn't have a choice. So for me, sometimes when I'm listening too much or caring for much, there'll be a little, there'll be a little growl. There'll be a little resentment if I see too many patients in a day. So when you start talking about self-care, that message starts coming clear. Wow, when I see too many people in a day and don't make time for the gym or for myself to take a walk, I'm not healthy. I'm not
Right.
effective. And it starts coming out in this growl or this anger or this pushback, and I want to listen to that rather than shaming myself for being angry or not working enough. These are ways in which maybe I override by using my thoughts. I override ways in which my body is showing me there's something really important to listen to here. So first of all, I want to normalize for any men out there, whatever addiction you have, uh, you know, whatever fears you have, intimacy, commitment, drugs, alcohol, you're not alone. Every man is battling with these ways of avoiding, and there's no rule that you can be working on your health and still be battling with the ways in which you avoid or self-medicate or find pleasure, uh, and yet know that those ways may not be the completely healthiest for you. And it's okay to know that you need others to be in exploration around figuring out what you need to be healthy. So the first thing is I may not have confidence, but I know when I'm in a men's circle or a group that I can call others. And it may feel real awkward. It may feel real silly. In fact, most men struggle with the embarrassment. I'm going to call Josh in the middle of a work day when he's busy. I'm going to call him when he's got a kid. I'm going to call him and say, Josh, I'm struggling right now. I want to go to a bar at 3 p.m. and what else did I do? I'm feeling like, just have a conversation that I'm pissed off or I'm angry because I got into a discussion or a conflict and I'm not sure what to do with it. So being in relationship, being in connection, heal, addressing our loneliness or separation, first of all, it's not a cure-all, but it starts to remove some of this feeling that we have to control all of our emotions or keep them down. So that's the first thing, right?
Yeah,
And this myth,
absolutely.
the myth that you have to go
I
through it
was just,
alone.
no, yeah, if anyone is listening or watching this podcast and it's the first one you've ever watched, go watch some of the other ones, because the whole reason that we started this thing is because of the failures and struggles that we go through. And me and my buddy that started it originally were so tired of all these places where men just talked about like all the success they had, and then it was never any failures, never any struggles, never any insecurities. And to your point, Dr. O, which I completely agree with,
So,
most people, when they meet me, perceive me as a very confident man. That's how I present myself for the most part. I have more insecurities than most, probably. I don't know, maybe not. But I have a shit ton of insecurities. I have a shit ton of fear. I have a shit ton of whatever non-confidence, whatever the opposite of confidence is. So whatever we put on the outside does not necessarily reflect what we have on the inside. Now, that being said, I've learned to have a lot of confidence with myself and with who I am as a person because, I've learned to love myself. But that doesn't mean that that comes naturally to me. It doesn't mean that I constantly have insecurities. It doesn't even mean, like, even if we went back to that example of my friend on social media, even getting that message, I was insecure about. I was like, oh no, what is he going to think about me? What's going to happen? Right? Like, instead of just coming from a place of confidence, when I first responded to him, it was a place of defensiveness. And I wrote the message And then I was like, you need to walk away from your phone. Walked away from my phone, came back, reread it. I was like, yeah, I need to change that message because it was coming from a place of insecurity and defensive instead of a place of confidence. So I 100% agree with you. The thing is, we all of us men have a certain level of confidence. We just might have lost it, right? And it might be overshadowed by all these other things. So I would agree with you. And I would also encourage everybody listening, like, this does not mean that you have to be the person that you see as like this confident, never having any issues person, because guaranteed they do. I've been in the finance world for a long time. I also own a financial planning company. And one thing I will tell you without a doubt is that the people that you would think are most financially successful often have the most fucked up balance sheets. And I think that there's a lesson there for just us as people, for our confidence, for who we portray ourselves as, right? Just because it looks like it. And I never reached out to another guy till I started my healing journey 6 years ago. And now hardly a day goes by where I don't make a phone call to somebody during the day to check in and talk about my emotions and to talk about where I'm at and everything else. And it's a beautiful place to be. But man, I lived, the first 30, however many years of my life, never even considering doing that. Never even considering it. And again, another shameless plug here. If you're watching or listening to this, you have 2 guys right now that have already offered to reach out to us. So reach out to us. Reach out to Dr. O. Reach out to me. Like, if you need somebody and you just want to start and it's awkward and you don't know what to do about it, it's cool, man. Like, the amount of conversations I've had, I'm sure similar to you, Dr. O, nothing surprises me anymore. So if you were to call me and tell me something crazy, I'm like, yeah, I've already heard it. It's all good. We've all been there. We've all been there.
No, I am amazed every single week, and I run a men's circle myself. I sit in as a participant in another circle, which means I'm there to do the work and just to be another jerk on the bus. But there is not a week that goes by that something that doesn't come up that I am both amazed by what a man has been and lived through and what they're going through, and the courage to face it and own it and ask for help, and where I am just amazed at when I see some part of myself or a part of my own childhood or something that's in me that I'm not fully embracing.
And to your point, I don't know if you've
see
experienced
something in
this.
other men that I am just blown away by their strength.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I think we had a little lag there. I apologize. Yeah, and I don't know if this has been your experience or not, but I've been to hundreds of therapy, group, 12-step sessions, etc. at this point in my life. And I was always under the impression that when you shared vulnerability and your fears and your insecurity and everything else, that made you weak as a man. And I'll tell you what, for anyone listening that might be struggling with that, the strongest men I know are the ones that will be humble and appear weak and talk about their insecurities and everything else. It makes them stronger. Always. Because it's not, and I don't mean the guys that are like, oh, my whole life is terrible, just this victim mentality. I don't mean that. I mean the guys that are just being authentic about their struggles and what they're going through. I have more respect, and I think they are the strongest men I've ever met. And the ones that are weak are the ones that pretend like they have no problems, which I have no respect for whatsoever. I don't know. That's been my experience.
Right. Or the opposite, which is men, we like to fix. We don't like to see anyone struggle. So we try and come in with the answer for someone else. So part of this willingness and openness is to sit in a space and help another man figure out his own way out. To be there as a witness and a support without solving it for another person, without assuming you know what's best for them. So that, being, a listener, being able to be a guide and a brother, often means putting apart our own agenda or assuming we ever know what someone is fully walking through or simplifying it. Oh, you should just stop drinking. Oh, you should just not be in that relationship or that career. So these things, there's no quick
Like
fixes,
somehow
no easy
that's
answer.
just, yeah. Yeah, somehow that's just going to be a light switch that just fixes everything, right? And well, if you just stop drinking, everything's going to be fixed. Really?
Right. Because, like we said, there's a wisdom, even though it seems right, like there's something that person is doing it to get them through something or avoid feeling, or because they have no idea. They are so terrified of what life might look like. So being able to help them figure out those things, right? Where would you go if you were scared? What could you do that would even feel good? What might be a hobby or a way of self-care that you could give yourself when everyone around you is drinking and drugging and they're going to shame you as only so that's a long journey, and even beginning to ask those questions and feel safe within yourself when the environment is invalidating or where change is hard. We never pretend to know what it's like to walk in another person's shoes. We don't know their perceptions of all the things that make them who they are. So, and to your point about social media, it's just really hard because in a second we get the most personal access to somebody else through a comment like that. And there's so hard to even have like we're doing right now. When we can see each other's eyes and face, I can see you. I can see what it means to you. And online, it's too much about our perception, right? Somebody's pegged us a certain way. They have a judgment on us. And those judgments are more about the person holding the judgment than they are about us. But we can't
Oh,
work
so
through it.
true.
We can't work through it because we're not looking at each other. So we just get this projection. Most of the way we interact with others is through projection because of our fears. So that's the first thing that I want men to realize, that a
Yeah.
lot of how you're being treated and reacted to, uh, it is true. I understand why we walk around feeling protected and guarded because we don't trust. And oftentimes we've had reasons not to trust. So finding those few, even if it's just one, and it may not be somebody from your group or someone from your career or someone, but the willingness of accountability partners. And by the way, this doesn't have to be for the men who are like, yeah, I don't want all this vulnerability stuff. I just want to move better in my career and I want to achieve more. Well, I got news for you. Your emotions are tied to becoming the most successful in whatever career you will be in, whether you be playing professional football or be high up in your trading firm. You need to be able to trust standing for yourself, setting healthy boundaries, saying what you need, and taking care of yourself, right? And if there's a disconnection there, there's going to be an imbalance. It's going to show up probably in your money. If it shows up in one place in a man's life, it's probably going to show up in another. So it's if you're not fully owning your need as a man to be supported, to be connected, it will affect your bottom line at some level. Like you said, the men who are hiding from their balance sheets, even though it looks like they have it all, they've got 3 houses they're defaulting on and abroad, potentially, or their relationships may not be the quality of connection that they need to feel to maintain. So,
Yeah, I think I want to touch on what you just talked about for a moment here, Dr. O, as well, for the listeners.
sure.
Like we're not talking about a crying circle,
Mhm.
right? So there might be some guys listening or watching right now that are like, well, like I'm just not an emotional guy. I don't want to deal with emotions. I don't want to go to a place where everybody's just crying and like talking about how, shitty their lives are and everything else. That's not even what we're talking about. If you're stuck in business, if you're stuck with your next relationship, if you're stuck with whatever, or maybe you're not even stuck, maybe you're hugely successful, but you still want to get to the next level. This is still all tied to this. This is not about a bunch of people that are so down on their luck that they just have nothing to live for. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about hugely successful men still in this context. This is not just the people on Skid Row. Going back to your original story at the very beginning of this podcast, this is not just talking about the guys on Skid Row. This is talking about the guys in Beverly Hills. It's the same thing, right?
It's
We
the
all have
everyman.
some.
It's Yeah, it's the
Absolutely.
everyman because that's the realization that all the things that I was taught, that if you get a PhD, that if you get a house, that if you get a car, that if you get the girl, then there's happy. All these illusions that we're all living under,
Right.
Maybe they be same
Right.
illusion, maybe they different ones. If I take care of my parents, if I make enough money to buy XYZ, it's not that I don't want to judge anyone's dream or their vision or what's motivating them, but on some level, that if you're not looking at yourself, if I didn't look at that by getting beyond my own mythologies and looking at, wow, what do I need? How do I grow? How do I get more connected? That I am so lonely pursuing external results that I'm not happy. I'm not fulfilled. So what good does it do to have degrees and monetary success without a sense of being a part of? So it's really about thinking about happiness. If your goal is happiness and long-term fulfillment, um, then making some shifts to allow in lovability, allowing the sense of that you don't have to go through this journey all on your own. You don't have to hold it. And there's a pressure there. There's a weight there. Um, and it's okay to drop some of that weight and let other people hold it. Other men hold it, for men in
That's
particular.
that's that's beautiful. Yeah, and it's hard for us as men to do that. Again, I'll be the first to raise my hand to say that it's not, thinking of being vulnerable or anything else is not first on my priority list. I try to figure everything out by myself still, even
Yeah.
after going through this long journey
Yeah.
myself. I do it.
And I'll give
So I guess,
one shameless plug before you
yeah,
take us next is that the organization I do the retreats through, I volunteer for, it's called the Remarkable Men's Practice, very similar to Mankind Project, a lot of the other Sterling Men's Weekend out there. So the idea that it's a practice, I think, is important. Same thing I focus on in my personal work, that no man has this figured out. All of us are constantly being driven and pulled with this nature. And so having a practice around accountability, having a practice around connection, we may not get it right. We may not get it perfect, but it's accepting that as I'm going through this, I don't have to do it alone, and I can practice these skills of reaching out, of looking at things a little bit differently, of being humble. How could I use this example with this high school guy? Is there an opportunity in it? Could I heal it? Is there an opportunity to heal the relationship, or is the lesson cutting people up, or is the opportunity, even asking those reflection questions? Do I want to post more and not respond to comments and filter out the haters, or do I want to engage more and get deeper? It's this process of getting within ourselves and looking at my reaction versus what do I want for an outcome, and how do I want to change as a man? What might be the experiment? Like we were talking about curiosity, is like, okay, is there play in this? That's the thing. As grown men, even with our beards and our hotels or our degrees, wherever we are, we still need play. We are seeking, as
absolutely.
human
Of
beings,
course.
we need to feel like life is part of that we are with others, that it's safe, and that we are enjoying. I don't know about fun, but that we feel good in our bodies. So, and that's a constant exploration about where that play is. And that is where there's agency and healing of no matter where you come from or what pain. You can heal now. You can heal in the emergency room with that nurse. You can heal when you're at, when you see somebody who's, acting out of control, and you make it fun for yourself, a game to get away from them. Whatever way you stay in touch with your personal power of, oh, this is an opportunity for me because I'm working on this moment here. It's here to show me something, to teach me something. Um, and if I don't know what it is, I'm going to step away, give myself time, space, or I'm going to reach out to someone who can help me get clear.
I love that. Thank you so much. Well, as we wrap up, Dr. O, first of all, again, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate your time. And again, for anyone listening or watching, check the resources, please, below. There will be some links to some of Dr. O's materials and groups that we have set up for help with men. And I guess my ending question would be, for the men that are listening or watching this, and maybe they want to kind of start this journey, or they want to continue this journey of just getting more open and trying to figure out what's blocking them, and a lot of the things that we've talked about today, where would you tell them to start? Like, what, if I think back about my life and I'm in my low 30s and I'd never really did any of this and I just really didn't want to unblock and I was stuck and everything else. But then I started hearing about this. I didn't know where to start. Where would you encourage them to start? What would be kind of your final word to them?
Well, again, this is why I wrote the book, The Zero Method. So there's inventories in there. It's not a heady book. There's 14 different sections. If you want to, if you don't want to look at getting a mentor or something like that, you can just look at your relationships, your values. So some personal opportunity to reflect daily, whether it be through the Zero Method or through getting a journal, some way where you begin to make self-time would be a start. And taking a look at what does self-care look like in your life. Getting into relationship, no matter where you are, is there someone who would be an accountability partner? Whether it be at the gym, someone that you call at a certain agreed upon time per week, or that you check in with. Being in relationship, getting into that accountability is the best start, and do it with the simplest barrier to entry, wherever it may be. There's no shame in if it's just a walk around a block or it's applying for one job. Wherever you are, acknowledging that your worth is in relationship. You have value to another human being.
Absolutely.
And if you have one person in your life that you're concerned about, you care about, you haven't been sure on how to approach, I would say practice taking risks, reaching out, getting coffee is, the greatest simple way, meeting people for lunch and just checking in, just seeing how they're doing, paying attention, noticing and being willing to ask for that support as well. So utilize the resources, see if you can listen to Josh's podcast or mine. Richard listens on Spotify. See if you get inspired or someone touches you in their journey. Sometimes if we're stuck in one aspect, all of us have been here and don't see out. Hearing others gives us some resilience and some inspiration. So give yourself those internal things that fill you up, that you are worth that. And you never know where life is going to go next. So try and whatever way to tap in.
So true.
We mentioned curiosity several times. So whether you're driving down the street, you pass a bookstore, a concert sign, if something resonates inside of you that goes, ooh, slow down for a minute, pull over. See if you can give yourself some connection to that experience that gives you a chance to feel happy or lights you up, and see what happens when you trust them.
So good. That's so good.
Mm.
And just again, as a reminder for everybody listening and watching, a link to Richard's book will be, or Dr. O's book, or Dr. Zero's book, whatever you want to call them, will be in the resources. So click it and buy it. Okay. It's going to be there. And as usual, please like the episode. Please rate us. I'm not doing that for a selfish reason, you guys, just real quick on this. I'm doing it because our goal is to get this out to more men. What Dr. O talked about today is gold. It's gold. So if you know a man that's in any area of development with any of the things he talks about, share this episode with them, please. You don't know if something in this hour-long episode they hear could completely transform their life. And I don't mean that in an exaggerated way. There are several things that Dr. O said here that if I would have heard and listened to earlier in my life, I think it would have transformed my life a lot faster than my life got transformed. And sometimes we have to experience things and everything else, but you don't understand the power of some of the things that he's talking about. So please, please, please share it with people. So again, Dr. O, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you. There was a lot of really good things to say. And so for everybody listening, thanks a lot, you guys. Love you, derelicts. Until next time, see you later.